Welcome to our webinar on integrated mobility and mobility as a service. This webinar is organized by the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform. Most of you will know the Policy Learning Platform. It is the second pillar of the Interreg Europe program, which is dedicated to capitalization across and beyond the work done in individual Interreg Europe projects. Amongst our services, we animate our community with webinars for knowledge exchange and networking like today's. My name is Katharina Krell. I'm a thematic expert in the topic of low carbon economy, that is energy and mobility. And I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon. And let me introduce my team. There is Simon Hunkin, thematic expert like myself in low carbon economy, and Jordi Jové Palou, our web expert. So this is the last webinar of the year for MaaS, perhaps also one of the last ones for you. As usual, our webinar is being recorded, and presentations and recordings are going to be made available to all who have signed up by email a couple of days after the event, together with our key learnings. Interaction for the audience as usual through the chat function, please. We're happy to take your questions and debate them with our experts after their presentations and in the end when we have our discussion rounds, if time permits. So our topic today is integrated mobility and mobility as a service, MaaS. Before we hear from our experts, we'd like to ask you, our participants, a little bit how much you know about MaaS and what has brought you here today. And we have 2 polls. So you can answer just by clicking on the polls. How is your understanding of MaaS? How do you rate your own knowledge of MaaS? Are you a MaaS expert? Are you fairly knowledgeable in MaaS? Do you have basic understanding and knowledge of MaaS, or are you a newcomer to the topic? So far, we have no MaaS experts, no self-declared experts. Well, I wouldn't declare myself an expert on MaaS either. I would say I'm fairly knowledgeable in MaaS. So far, the highest response, 50% have basic knowledge and understanding, 30% fairly knowledgeable, and 20% are new to the topic and no experts. Thank you, Lotte. Let's see the next poll. What is your motivation to join our webinar today? And this is a multiple choice. You can tick several answers. So, do you think MaaS might be interesting for your city? Do you want to see practical applications of MaaS in different contexts? Are you particularly interested in legal aspects? Would you like to know if MaaS is helping with greening of mobility? Or is your interest purely academic? So let's see a little bit. Highest score, 80%, you want to see applications, practical applications of MaaS in different contexts. Well, I think we can give you that. 45 think MaaS might be interesting for their city. That's interesting. And 35% want to know if MaaS is helping with greening mobility. Great. Thank you very much for giving us this background about you. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. We have lined up a quite knowledgeable panel for you. First of all, my colleague Simon is going to make a little thematic introduction to the topic, and then we'll have a keynote from Jorge Bandeira. Jorge is with the University of Aveiro, very active in the PriMaaS project, the Interreg Europe project, mostly dedicated to MaaS amongst all of them. And yeah, so we have our speakers have turned on the camera. Jorge, hi.
Hello, Katharina. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning from Portugal. Then we're having 3 good practices, starting off with Vasilis Mizaras from CERT. He's sitting in Thessaloniki, and he's explaining us about a little bit a theoretical introduction to different shapes of MaaS, and then about the eMaaS platform pilot in Thessaloniki. Hello, Vasilis.
Hello to everyone. Hello.
Then we'll hear. Thank you. Then we'll hear from Mattias Svahn from Stockholm about integrated ticketing in Stockholm. Hi, Mattias. And last but not least, we will move south to Barcelona and hear from Jordi Jové Palou from the metropolitan area of Barcelona from the Smart MR project in their recent efforts to legislate some of the emerging e-mobility, micro-mobility, and we'll hear about Barcelona's regulatory framework. Hi, Jordi.
Hello.
Good, and we'll end with a question and discussion round. So I will hand over to Simon for the thematic introduction, please.
Okay, thank you, Katharina, and good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, why are we looking at this topic today of integrated mobility and mobility as a service? Well, at this point, I think we all understand the need to drive down carbon emissions and the important role that transport and mobility play in these emissions. There's a significant need to move people towards low carbon modes, in particular to active transport and to shared and public transport. Encouraging people to move from private vehicles to shared low carbon modes requires enabling of behavior change through new business models and information provision, for example. At the same time, we need to consider issues of congestion, air quality, noise pollution, and road safety, as well as inclusivity in urban areas. So we see mobility there affecting many different policy sectors. But how can people be encouraged to change? Well, making low carbon choices needs to be easy. The cost needs to be low, it needs to be competitive, and comfort and convenience need to be improved. For this, considerations need to be made for information provision, for route planning, ease of access to transport and exchange between modes, payment methods, integrated ticketing, and customer comfort. So how can this be done? Well, many things need to be considered, but integrated mobility options are varied and multiple. Many regions now have experience of this, though not all do. So I mean, we're talking here about having single payment systems and single ticketing systems, such as travel cards that can be used across modes, but also integrated information platforms and route planners, providing information on timetables, vehicle locations, stops, and the optimum routes to get from A to B. This information needs to be available not only on websites and apps, but also in vehicle and in transport stops. And consideration needs to be given also to physical transfer and development of multimodal hubs. So mobility as a service is much more complex, but these ideas can be first steps for regional authorities. So mobility as a service is recognized as a potential game changer in encouraging a shift to low carbon transport by mixing both public and private transport modes, so public transport, vehicle sharing, taxis, and rental systems. So yeah, integrating them into a single service that can be accessed via a single platform. Mobility as a service systems use a single payment system and a single ticketing system, meaning only one payment is needed, reducing the number of transactions and saving time for users. They typically function from a route planner. So you put in the starting point and the end point, and it calculates the most optimal route. So users can take account of options and choose the most appropriate, looking at issues such as time, cost, number of changes, and comfort. So mobility as a service offers many benefits, but of course, there are still several challenges to be overcome, and there are not so many examples of proven systems yet in place. So that's the aim for today, to learn a little bit more about the challenges, a little bit more about the solutions, and to hear some good examples from across Europe. So thank you, and with that, I'll pass back to Katharina.
Thank you, Simon. Let's fill that a little bit with life, and I would like to hand over for the keynote to Jorge Bandeira, please. We can see, but you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon or good morning to everyone. Thank you, Katharina, and also Simon, for this nice introduction about MaaS. My topic today is about how to ensure the sustainability of MaaS. And I will start from the very basics for the very few that are not familiar with this concept, what MaaS. So for now, the current paradigm is that we have different ways of interaction with different modes. We have different ways, for instance, for pay the bus, we have a monthly pass for the metro, or we pay the cash, the taxi driver. We have an app for the soft mobility systems like scooters, a lot of different ways. With the MaaS platform, the idea is to put this interaction together and combine into a single platform. The most advanced MaaS platforms are used to plan, to book, to pay, or even to subscribe different mobility package according to our needs. This is the basic concept what is a MaaS platform. Of course, there is different needs, and there are we need different ingredients to make our MaaS a truly functional and attractive services. So to make a real tasty cake of MaaS, we need very good ingredients. First of all, you need, of course, a good cooking bowl, which is a good connectivity and open data. Of course, you need also very good flour, and this flour is a very strong and current public transport network, a public transport system. We also need a very good quality and transparent olive oil, which is a clear legislation, a clear regulatory framework to set up all the duties and responsibilities of each player. And of course, you need eggs to bind all these ingredients, and you need the trust and understanding between stakeholder ingredients. Finally, we have the secret ingredient that nobody knows yet, which is a sustainable business model. Well, these are the MaaS ingredients that you should have to provide a good MaaS cake. And what are these MaaS services should provide? Should provide better information, better planning for people, better capabilities, of course, greater interoperability between modes through easy booking and payment. This MaaS services platform should be personalized, should be focused on the needs of the users, and at the end should be a tool for provide more intelligent networks, transport networks, through a better adaptation of supply to demand. And of course, at the end, we hope that this reduce the need for our own chip, and at the end could bring greener mobility, of course, if it is based on public transport and low carbon modes. But are we really getting there with our systems today? This is the topic that I would like to address also today. In PriMaaS, through a set of interviews and stakeholder meetings that you have carried out in our project, we have seen that as the regions advance in the level of MaaS integration, the perception of the different barriers are also different. In the regions where you are starting now, for like Portugal and Romania, you see that the most difficult part is first to put the stakeholders in the table. It's the stakeholders agreement to start moving the process. Then you have the intermediate regions. We have the problems, more practical problems with the issues of ICT and open data standards. And also legislation and regulation frameworks. that at the end, in the most advanced regions, the Nordic countries, the biggest problem now is how to find a sustainable business model. This is the key issue. Of course, at the same time, it was good to note that stakeholders of all regions are already aware of some risks that can come with the MaaS, both at economic, operational, and sustainable level. I will not spend much time here, but I will just say that I will focus more on this issue, the sustainability and problems associated with the MaaS development. And to address this issue, in the course of the project, we noticed that besides the integration level, you needed a new framework to classify other dimensions of the societal contributions of the MaaS platform. So we developed this multidimensional indicator of MaaS systems performance, devoted to support users to know the coverage, scalability of services, and social impacts of MaaS systems, and also to support experts and regional policymakers to benchmark and compare their regional integrated mobility services and performances. So this is the basic concept of our sustainability indicator. We have developed this indicator based on three main pillars: coverage, functionality, and sustainability. And each pillar is divided into different areas: the geographic area coverage, the multimodality, the integration of services, the level of personalization, environmental policy, and social cohesion policy. Then for each of these dimensions, you may give a score between 1 and 5 with different criteria that I will summarize some one of them. And then, of course, you can manage different ways to present the results. If you want to try yourself this indicator, we developed a free tool, which is a very simple MATLAB program that you can download from our web page in PriMaaS. We also can check this open paper, the multidimensional indicator of MaaS systems performance, that it's available online and through the website. Please feel free to use it and comment, and also give some suggestions for improvement. So just to cover to know how this work. For instance, the geographical area, the principle is very simple. If it is a single municipality, we receive a score of 1. But this classification is improving if you go towards generalized cross-border services. Of course, in terms of functionality, we have in the first part the level of integration, which is for those who are familiar with the MaaS classification level. This was a concept developed by a Swedish researcher. And then you have these very basic classifications based on information, trip planning, payment and ticketing, and bundling subscription, and you will receive an extra score from each one of these features. And then at the level of the personalization, the idea is to assign a higher score the lower users' efforts to interact with the MaaS platform, using a set of cumulative features like voyage customization, personalization, automated personalization, and the very end, integration with the Internet of Things and some of the smart city concepts. Now moving to the environmental contribution, just highlight some features that can contribute to a high level score. If you have the possibility of customize some environmental goals, if I want to select a low carbon mode or electric car, If I receive some points of bonification to get some discounts if I use low carbon modes, or even if we have active and dynamic pricing policies to promote the use of low carbon modes and discounts for sustainable travel choices. And finally, an extra bonus if these MaaS platforms is integrated with regional or urban planning strategies and provides also a clear evaluation framework of the contributes for the society. So in the project, and also to develop our baseline assessment report, you apply this indicator to different regions and to different countries of our consortium in Finland, Germany, Romania, Portugal, Italy, Sweden. And you can see that the first main conclusion is that there is a clear trade-off between the coverage and functionality. Of course, this is easy. For instance, if you have women in Finland, you have a very high level of integration, but is limited to the cities where the MaaS platform is operating. Of course, you have the opposite. For instance, in Google Maps, you have a very wide geography and scope. But of course, in terms of functionality, is limited. We just provide information in real time or routing to the people. Of course, we have also flexible apps that works in all Europe, but in terms of modes is very weak, and the integration in personalization is also weak. Secondly, you can also see that in terms of sustainability, mainly in environmental contribution, there is a lot of space for improvement, and there is a lot of potential for improvement, and that actually all these apps lacks of active policies and measures to make the environmental modes more attractive. Of course, that in terms of the overall score, you can see that to achieve a 1, that is a maximum, there is a lot of possibilities for improvement, and also comparing with the other stakeholders. Well, I'm finishing the presentation, and I would like to just share three main messages. The first one is that MaaS, that to be more than simple planning and payment, make payment more convenient, to be an instrument for sustainable mobility is a long journey. We don't want just to have this. For instance, Uber or this kind of services can be considered like a mobility service, but is actually not contributing for sustainability goals. Also, you can access to this to e-scooters. You can also have, but the final goal should be to combine all these modes. And to combine the different soft modes with the public transport, and also, for instance, to access with the low carbon transport modes to these events. This is the ultimate goals, but this is a long journey. It's not great and taken for granted that you have achieved this with a simple MaaS. We have shown also in our project that is vital to have very good quality public transport in urban zones, and innovative demand responsive transit systems in rural areas to connect to the suburbs in the low density areas to urban areas. We have also make some surveys here in Portugal, and you see that in the cities that the quality of public transport is better, people are more willing to uptake a MaaS service if there is good connectivity in the city. And this was very clear from our study. Also, the need that there is the issue of open data. Everyone talks about the obligation that operators must provide to offer data that feeds MaaS platforms through the national accessing points or other frameworks. But it's also important that there is a clear regulation that the MaaS brokers also should provide authorities with the data and transparent KPIs in terms of modal distribution, average ecological footprint of the MaaS users. So in this way, only that way it's possible to involve public authorities and also improve this virtuous cycle to adjust offer and foster the inclusion of societal goals in the MaaS platforms. Finally, know that the car is always there. Is the final slide, and we must be smarter as the way you consider the use of the cars in our regions. This is a very quick example. If I drive in the rural areas, the taxes that I pay, for instance, for the study, it's higher than the externalities, the impact on the society that I cause. But if I drive my car in the city, in the congested area, actually the taxes and the contribution for society for every kilometer that I travel is much lower than the impact that I cause. And I think you have to start to think about how to take advantage of this gap to make charging of mobility in private cars also part of this concept of road use as a service. Thank you so much for your attention. I will be happy to respond and to contribute to this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jorge. I think very, very interesting presentation and tremendously interesting the comparison of all the MaaS schemes that you have made. What is very clear is that MaaS does not automatically lead to more sustainable mobility. I think this is a very important message. And so I think the motivation for engaging into MaaS must be right. It is not the silver bullet for sustainability, but of course it makes mobility, especially in an urban context, much more comfortable. I would like to have a short question. You studied all these MaaS examples from all over the EU. Which of them, if you have to name them, would you consider true MaaS examples? Like, and what are the criteria that they have to fulfill to be considered like full-fledged MaaS?
Okay, I think that in all this list, I think the most evident example what is truly MaaS could be a WIM in Finland, which is lit for the private sector, and it's a mobility app that also includes public transport, city bikes, e-scooters, rental cars, and shared cars. It allows to pay single tickets or subscription plans. Well, this is a typical example which is a MaaS platform. Also, you have, I have no time to highlight this, but you have also the AMT GENMA application, which is an official application led by the public mobility and transport company of GENMA in Liguria, which is also a partner of the PriMaaS project. Mm-hmm. And which is very advanced in the way that also provides information in real time, what are the buses in real time, it also allows the purchasing of tickets, and also the application provides specific information for disabled groups, for blind people, with some problems of mobility, accessibility. So which is a different concept, based more led by the public sector, but is also a very nice example of integration.
Thank you very much. So we know where to go for a study trip, Helsinki and Genova, if we want to see a full-fledged MaaS applications. Thank you, Jorge, for the intro keynote. I would like to hand over to Vasilis Mizaras from Greece. Vasilis, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Just give me 1 second. So my name is Vasilis Mizaras. I'm representing the Hellenic Institute of Transport, CERT in Greece. And the presentation is about how to develop a mobility as a service system. And we have the example of eMaaS platform of Central Macedonia in Thessaloniki, where E stands for electro mobility. So the first thing is to understand what is the environment. The mobility by default has a lot of options for the traveler, for the user. So hopefully there is an integrated transit system, public transport system. We have one in Thessaloniki, but then of course this has to compete with private and individual vehicles, our vehicles, let's say our cars, but also with other means like public vehicles, but for individual use, like taxis, etc. What is, let's say, more important is to understand what is the ecosystem, because the ecosystem really has different players, and these different players have a lot of different objectives and requirements and so on. So on the upper level, we have, I will start with those people, because those companies, because these are the disruptors in this ecosystem, in this market, and these are the service providers that are providing sharing services, or the service providers that are providing on-demand services. Then we have, let's say, the traditional service providers. Of course, the main ones are the public transport service providers, but also taxis, etc. And then on the left hand, we have the authorities. We have public transport authority, a local authority, the city, and this they need to regulate and to monitor and to enforce and to do all the planning for the city, but also to provide the means for procurement and subsidy of the mobility system. So all this have to cooperate somehow, and then at the end we see the need for a neutral entity that will be the glue for all the different service providers. Then we have to take a lot of decisions, and the first decision is who is going to run the show. And the most dominant model this time is public transport. So the public transport is the one that takes the responsibility of being the mobility as a service player, the main one. Then we have another option, which is private initiative. So we have different MaaS service providers providing different services to the users. And then we have a third option, which is to have an open backend platform. This is a platform that collects the data, let's say, and provides supports and feeds with data all the different MaaS players. And these are multiple ones for one city. Then another important thing is to distinguish between what is the operation and what is we mean the services to the users, the application to the users, but and what is the data management, the aggregation of the data in the system, and the services or concerning the mobility services. And then we have again a lot of options there. Our favorite one is that we may have one platform operator, one MaaS platform operator, and then we can interact and cooperate with different complete MaaS systems that they have their own backend and their own application for the end user. So what is the preferred model? I'm not talking about a correct model. There is no such thing as a correct model, but what was the preferred model that we have actually adopted by the Hellenic Institute of Transport and for all the developments we're doing in Thessaloniki and other places in Greece? We favor a multiple private initiative deployment of MaaS systems with potential collaboration with the public sector through authorities, but also the public transport, and through the use of a neutral platform. And what does this neutral platform do is does all the orchestration, let's say, but there are three main functions that should be taken into account. One is about the data, so aggregates data, brokers the data, etc. One is about the assessment of the mobility services, so this platform should be able to assess the usage and demand and also the influence on user behavior by the introduction of the MaaS system. And third one is, let's say, the policy part, which is about setting up KPIs about sustainability, efficiency, and user inclusivity. So about the eMaaS itself, just a few words. It's deployed in Thessaloniki. It's the first electromobility platform, mobility as a service in Greece. It is led by the industry, so by three private service providers. And the main objective is the promotion of mobility services by shared electric vehicles, includes scooter sharing, bike sharing, car sharing. You can see the car there. but also parking services, so we can include park and ride, as well as charging. And the major breakthrough is that we provide this neutral platform, which is going to be an added value to the cities by providing data collection and analysis. So the special distribution and the operational model, we in fact are based on a station-based system with parking areas. So there are 5 parking areas deployed in the city of Thessaloniki, and these work as multimodal mobility hubs. And this can enable park and ride, charging of the private car. So one individual can charge an electric car of his own and then take, for example, an e-scooter or a bike and continue the trip. But also parking and charging of the shared vehicles are important from the logistics point of view. And then we have free-floating bike sharing, and these are virtual bike stations, and they feed actually these mobility hubs in the first and last mile of transportation. The application itself includes multimodal trip planning, real-time information about availability of the services, booking, rental, payment, all in one app. And there is a single e-wallet for all the applications, and we have for all the mobility services, sorry. And we have also 3 different payment models. One is pay as you go. Then we have a normal subscription model. So an individual can pay a monthly fee and then have a discounted price on pay as you go. But we have also a student subscription package. We have surveyed the stakeholders, and in these stakeholders, we include local authorities, mobility service providers, so I mean cities, different municipalities, public transport authority, but also academic research bodies, as well as associations. The blocking issues basically are 3. We have insufficient cooperation identified between the different stakeholders, reluctance of public organizations, but also of companies to share their data, and we have a very spread culture of ownership and use of private car by the end users, by the travelers. Then what are the ambitions? Is the restriction of the private car use, the offer of personalized transportation solutions, and the reduction of social inequalities in transportation. So we fill in the gaps that are not covered by the public transport nowadays. Then survey of the user needs and opinions. I think these are the 2 most important outcomes we have. What is the possibility of using MaaS application with these shared electrical vehicles only? 44 of the total interviewed, which was a sample of approximately 300 people, declared willing of using this eMaaS, and 61 of those people are willing to use eMaaS exclusively for their travels. And this is an important part as well, because it means that they will leave their private cars home, wherever, and they will use eMaaS for covering their travel. On the other hand, what is the importance of integrating more services in this eMaaS system? And over 80% of the total interviewed consider public transport integration with micromobility of some or great importance. So this is the main concern of the end users, to have micromobility integrated with public transport. Some conclusions, and I'm finishing. Private initiatives in micromobility are those moving faster and more aggressively the mass market. It means that these, they have, as I said before, they have, let's say, the innovation, the risk, they are taking the risk, they invest money, but they lack the resources needed for scalability. So we need thousands of bikes, in fact, to cover all the mobility needs. The travelers wish there is a collaboration between public transport and micromobility, and the public transport will provide the backbone to the mobility network and also large multimodal mobility hubs, so they can provide the critical mass that MaaS can cover. The authorities, on the other hand, they require a data analytics tool to regulate and to monitor the MaaS environment, so they can take decisions and actions later on based on the actual impact that is measured through the introduction of this eMaaS system. Multiple MaaS implementations should coexist, so we should go not for just one MaaS application if it is possible, but for more. And this can be, they can compete one to another, or then they can cooperate one to another. The MaaS implementations can constitute a MaaS living lab. That means that we can have innovation work in progress. In fact, the Hellenic Institute of Transport is running the Thessaloniki Mobility Living Lab, and we are very favorable of having a MaaS living lab there. And a triple helix partnership covering both public, private, and research is needed in order actually to cover all the needs and be the glue. The neutral partner in this case could be Hellenic Institute of Transport. And this is all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vasilis. I think very interesting that your eMaaS includes parkings as a way to charge cars, but also as an intermodal hub. I think that's an outstanding feature. And then I want to know, among those willing to use eMaaS exclusively, do you know who these people are? Is it certain age groups that are more inclined to want to go for?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. That's in fact a very good question. We have two results. One was not expected and it's not so pleasant. The first one is that we're actually eMaaS is mostly targeting on people using these days more active ways of transportation anyway, so walking, basically. The second is that the age group of 20 to 35 is the one that is more willing to use eMaaS. But I think this has to do with the nature of micromobility, and this is why it's important somehow to be combined with public transport.
Yeah. Well, we have afterwards Barcelona, where we'll discuss more the benefits and difficulties that this micro-mobility, micro-e-mobility is bringing to the transport system. Just very quick, the travelers are expecting an integration with public transport. Are you making any progress of integrating the Thessaloniki bus network?
Yes, the first thing we're trying to do is awareness. So it's important that both the private service providers know that there is an authority that is willing to do this integration with micromobility. On the other hand, we have to work a lot with the public transport authority. The public transport authority, of course, the public transport in general, all the stakeholders, they feel very strong and we have the power and we are moving hundreds of thousands of people every day, but they are becoming more and more aware of micromobility and the benefits one could have if we have an integrated mobility system. So we are planning to have, in fact, some more pilots, including the public transport authority in next years, including this integration with micromobility. So this is an important step for us.
Very good. So you're struggling exactly where Jorge was saying, many are struggling at the cooperation of the stakeholders, and congratulations that you are seeming to overcome this step. I think it's very important that the public transport network is part of the MaaS, or else it remains too limited. Thank you very much, Vasilis. I would like to hand over now to Stockholm, where Mattias Svahn is going to explain us about the integrated ticketing, and I hope that we will improve a little bit the timekeeping. Mattias, over to you.
Hi. That's a story here of one stakeholder, though a rather special one. Okay. Stockholm public transport today. Today is cold and dark. But we transport 1 million people, 3 million journeys per day, on 150 kilometers times 150 kilometers areas. And it's both urban, suburban, as well as fully rural. And the interesting bit here is a single ticket intermodular system, trains, boats, subway, buses, and boats. So one single ticket costs 39 crowns, equivalent to circa 358 euros. Now that's blipped on a Visa or MasterCard, the one you carry in anyway, one time at the start of the journey, and then valid for unlimited travel for 75 minutes. And so you can step across buses, trains, boats, etc. in freely during those 75 minutes. And there is no need to find a kiosk or similar as a point of sales. And this is all one single payment zone. Perhaps it's worth putting in as a side note here that e-scooters like Voi and similar are not included. So all in one single payment zone. How did we do that? Well, it's a rather specific story, and rather specific reasons of Stockholm geography, Swedish constitutional history, and local politics. Now, Stockholm is a big urban area, no other big cities nearby. It's a bit of a lonely city, and this makes for it's a rather simple commuting pattern into the city in the morning, out of the city in the afternoon, star-shaped basically. And in the area of 79 million people pass through Stockholm. And given that it's built on islands with bridges, an attractive long-distance intra-regional system is a survival necessity. So let me delve into a little bit of constitutional history here, spending the short time. For historical constitutional reasons, Sweden is divided into 21 semi-independent regional councils, delegated state authorities, smaller than the country, larger than just one city. The Stockholm one is, of course, the city of Stockholm and 25 other municipalities. Now I'm going to tell you a story about how these decide everything. So it's worth noting here that these are democratically elected bodies with their own democratically elected assemblies. Now these organize mostly healthcare, cultural policies, and public transport. So this means what you see here is that it's the orange area, which feels like a city. And the yellow areas are mostly rural, quite actually countryside. So, but it's still Stockholm, all of it. Perhaps a little bit confusing, but that's the way it is. And so Stockholm public transport has always been very much of a top-down project under indirect delegated state control. It has been as an issue of national interest, funded 50% by tickets, 50% by taxpayers. In some cities, particularly, for example, London and New York, it has grown organically from below, but that is not the case here. And today, there is a publicly held company called Stockholms Lokaltrafik AB, who oversees the system. It's today a large public procurer purchasing transport services and mechanical services. That's where the private sector comes in as subcontractors to the large holding company. But as a normal citizen, what you see is the SLAB brand. The private entrepreneurs who do the actual work are rather invisible, and they have no say in ticketing policies. Now, for many decades, it was a natural thing that a short trip was cheaper and a longer trip more expensive. That was just, the ordinary thing. You see here an old map showing the old zoning system, and the Swedish text in blue says the number of coupons you need depends on how many zones you travel through. One zone is 2 coupons. Now, when digital tickets were first introduced around 2008, 2010 circa, the old system became a burden. Users had to set and reset various payment levels, etc. And this new first generation digital tickets, this was confusing. Some paid too little, some paid too much. There was complexity. Bus drivers got slowed down, explaining, managing things. And what's actually realized was that a part of the problem here was thinking in the terms of paper tickets and paper coupons that no longer existed. So it was realized that this metaphor of paper tickets was cumbersome, inefficient, wasted work time, was not transparent, and the language was simply not fit for purpose. So the simplification process was started, drafted by a series of political decisions in the Greater Stockholm Regional Council, the yellow and orange thingy you just saw, over the years 2015, 16, and started in 17. Now, the simplification, doing away with all the old and putting in place something new, meant that a price increase of 10 to 20 euro cents for short distance travelers, typically 1 or 2 subway stations in the middle of the city, and then cut in half for long distance intra-regional travelers going from north to south or from out in the archipelago in the Baltic Sea to into the country or something like that. Now, the change was designed to be cost neutral in the 50-50 financing system, and it was. Was this controversial? Nope. There was actually general unity between the traditional right and the traditional left, and it sort of sailed above the ordinary everyday right and left fight in a politically elected council. Now, here is the point. The other 25 municipalities, whoopsie daisy, the other 25 municipalities that you see here, they simply had no say in this. So that meant that the inner city of Stockholm, they were of course slightly unhappy, and it became maybe a little bit more expensive for the person who lived in the inner city of Stockholm and who traveled typically 1 or 2 subway stations a day, but much cheaper and easier for the long distance intra-regional traveler. So this idea was very much in the favor of these, and these are the ones who typically choose a car instead. So this is a real life practice, no control group. The observations is could be done because of the relatively simple commuting pattern, the star shape. There is no indication of people actually changing away from, this should perhaps be a little bit adjusted, the text here. There's no indication of people changing away because of the changed system. And what can be noted is that the growth of travel on the Stockholm public transport system since this was introduced in 2017 has been greater than the overall general growth of economy and population of the greater Stockholm area, which indicates a net transfer of intra-regional travel away from cars. That's measured from 17 to today. Of course, the pandemic years made a mess of all this, but if you measure from 17 to between 22, that is the trend that you will find. Okay, so run through all this rather quickly. I guess we have some time left for questions.
Thank you very much.
Timekeeping.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mattias. I think your example from Stockholm is really interesting because you have an integrated ticket and one single zone. Now, one single zone is not exceptional in itself, but in your case it is, because the zone is the whole region. So it's the extent of the zone which is really outstanding. And the impact with the introduction of this single zone, that you actually make it easier for the commuters. And those are the ones which usually use the cars to come into the city. So I think many cities that envy you for your big coverage of the whole functional area. Whereas in most countries, I think the mobility policy stops at the limitations of the city, and it doesn't cover the functional hinterland from which the commuters are coming. So thank you for sharing that example. But how did this set up this large region? Do you see any disadvantages for the city mobility policy because you don't have any power over it, or is it just an advantage?
You mean a disadvantage for the city of Stockholm? Well, the obvious answer is that, of course, when this simplification was introduced, the short distance travel, which typically is within the city, the area that feels like the city, like an urban city of Stockholm, is actually rather small. And that area, of course, was disadvantaged when the price was raised. So it can feel expensive if you're just going between 2 subway stations with a couple of 100 meters apart in the center of the city. But what they say, the company says, the SLAB company says in response to this is that, well, if people start walking instead, that's just good for public health. So the system is intentionally designed to be antagonistic against long distance intra-regional car use. That is what this system is designed to compete with, on the cost of the short distance traveler within cities. So that is, it's rather, I mean, and this was, of course, this could be pulled through because of this way that policies are decided at the regional level above the municipalities, who could be happy or unhappy about it. So it's quite a biased system. Indeed it is, but it's biased in the favor of the long distance intra-regional traveler going from north to south and so. The reason for this can be that all these travelers still have to pass through the center of the city. So this small medieval center, for geographical reasons, with the islands and the waters and the bridges. So all these travelers going from north to south still have to pass through the center. which makes for a rather hellish situation at rush hour. So reducing this any way that these people can be moved away from the personal car
is also an advantage.
Yeah, that's the overall
inner
goal.
City dwellers, yes, I understand.
So this perhaps a little rough policy of going against this interest of the inner city is still in the interest of the inner city of reducing the number of travelers simply passing through.
Thank you very much. That's very, very interesting, your case. Thanks for sharing. I would like to hand over, before we come to our joint discussion, to Jordi from Barcelona. Jordi, you have the case where the city has seen a necessity to regulate or to come up with some legal innovations because of the introduction of micro e-mobility. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Katharina. So can you see my presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Jordi from Barcelona metropolitan area. I'm going to share with you our experience on regulating the sharing mobility services. I will go through quickly about the introduction. We are a municipal administration englobing 36 municipalities. We have several competences. One area of competence is mobility, and inside this area we have also different kind of competence. And I'm going to the key point. I'm going to explain you the Barcelona City motor sharing experience on how we regulate it. Everything started on 2016 when the first motor sharing operators landed in Barcelona City with no regulated framework. On the next year, the Barcelona City Council started a consultative process to look for the best solution to regulate or organize the situation, because there were more operators willing to land to the city. During this process, the other operators landed the city, and in 2019, the Barcelona City Council wrote a new rule about the motor sharing regulation. The City Council did a binding process and awarded the licenses in 2020. And from then, there are 1,014 licenses and 10 operators working on the Barcelona City. The new rule. All operators must comply with the current regulation. The most important aspects of this new rule are that each vehicle must have a unique and visible indication number. All must incorporate geolocalization. The municipal access have to be given to the system usage. Every operator cannot concentrate more than the 50% of the fleet in the city center. All vehicles must be anchored and parked in the spaces provided on the public road. Wrongly parked vehicles must be recollected within 24 hours. And there is a rate of more than 70 euros per vehicle per year to be paid. This is also both for motorcycles, cycles, or other vehicles. What was the metropolitan situation? Before the regulation carried out by the Barcelona City Council, there were several operators offering services around the Barcelona's area. And now we have 10 operators in the Barcelona City Councils, and 5 provide service beyond the Barcelona City to other municipalities. We studied in the 2018 the share from micromobility in the metropolitan area. And as you can see, we have a very few use of shared bicycle or motorcycle. If we check the difference between cycling and motorcycles, the shared bicycle has nearly 21% of share, facing the only 1% of the motorcycle. So which were the motivations for the Metropolitan Shared Electric Motorcycle Service that we started regulating? There are very relevant mobility flows through the metropolitan area and beyond the Barcelona city. It offers a new way of moving, complementary to the existing means of transport. It optimizes the use of vehicles and magnifies the need to own one. And also it's electric mobility. And also we have a specific instruments that collected, like the government agreement of the Barcelona metropolitan area, the metropolitan urban mobility plans, and an agreement for a new metropolitan mobility that supported the idea. We set up a working table for the Metropolitan Shared Vehicle Motorcycle Services with 3 objectives. The first one was to establish a stable framework of dialogue and technical participation. The second one was to identify the relevant and necessary issues to be addressed in the regulation. And the third was the study of the feasibility of this service in the metropolitan area. We carried out different sessions of this working table. There were 2 general meetings, one about the benchmarking about shared electric motorcycle circuits in Europe, and another one about the operative point of view. And we did some working sessions about specific aspects like road safety and vandalism, shared vehicle motorcycle service operation, the regulatory mechanism, and the model of regulation, the area to operate, and the data about the sharing and service platforms. So, the working table of the Metropolitan Shared Electric Motorcycle established a legal framework. First, we are working on the regulatory basis and debating of this sharing service. We also work in parallel on the delegation of powers from the municipalities to the metropolitan area, because this competence is not of the ones that we have also delegated. And after that, we are going to award and distribute the licenses between all the metropolitan area. And I think I fit the time, Katharina.
Very well, Jordi. Thank you very much. How large is the metro area? Does it include all the municipalities and some of the peri-urban area, or does it really stop at the what we consider the city limits? I can't hear you. You are muted.
Sorry. I was saying I'm going to change the map again. As we are 36 municipalities, but we are working on 2 levels of integrated areas. The first step is always the Barcelona city, and around the 18 municipalities around them. So it's not all the 636 square kilometers.
I see, I see.
Because they are the most populated area and the most interesting in mobility terms.
Yeah, I mean, the private operators always do the cherry picking because they don't consider inclusiveness, but profitability. I would like to hear from you. The city or the administration has gone through quite a lot of extra effort to regulate the shared e-scooters, but you showed that they only represent a very tiny fraction of mobility. Does it justify? How do you see the benefits of it? Does it justify
yeah.
all the efforts that you're making to have them?
We think yes, because this small share of the use was not well represented on the road and the urban space. So this kind of shared mobility was being a problem on the streets because not all motorcycles were parked. There was not, as you said before, an interest from the operators to operate in an equal way on all municipalities. So there was a big difference. There was a regulation problem on the street. So we think that it makes the effort to regulate it in order to have the amount of vehicles on the street just and necessary for the needs of the mobility, not more and even not less where the operators don't want. So if we are asking the operators, and that's one of the parts of the discussion on these working shops and working table with the operators, is how to distribute all these vehicles between all the municipalities, the operation area, the limits, and all this stuff.
And do you see that the e-scooters can make a contribution to the greening of the mobility patterns? Do you see a potential growth in the future for them?
We think that will help us to have a better and sustainable mobility. We have to take into account that Barcelona has a very high use of motorcycle. The private one is one of the main private modes, motorized private modes, and this is also a problem in a urbanistic and space regulation, because we are again working to gain more space for pedestrians and people, and these motorcycles are parked on the work site. So we need to reduce the number of motorcycles on the city, and one way is to offering these shared ones to the city.
So through sharing, you reduce the number, and through making them electric, the emissions. Okay.
Exactly.
And well, since we're talking about the integration and integrated ticketing, can they be booked through an integrated platform?
We will work on it. We have a strategy on all sustainable mobility services to offering a metropolitan platform for all the services integrated. And one of the objectives of this regulation is to introduce them in a regulated or in a common platform.
Thank you very much. Great. So I would like to move to a question with all of the speakers, to a little discussion, I mean, and our audience has been shy with questions. There have been some comments from Tirana and from Łódź. I think that's the way it's pronounced, Łódź, Poland. And so interesting to read those, but don't be shy. You can still submit some questions through the chat. In the meantime, I would like to discuss here with our speakers. Now, if there was, if a city is checking if it should or should not go for a MaaS, if there was a checklist for these cities that are interested, what would you recommend that mobility policy makers have to consider in order to decide if they should push the development of higher integration of ticketing and mobility as a service in their city? And the floor is open. I don't know who wants to go first. We can take you in the order of appearance. Maybe that's easiest. That would mean Jorge first.
Thank you, Katharina. Yeah, I think the question is related with the first slide I presented with the ingredients. I think it's essential to have, first of all, a good public transport network. Otherwise, the system will not be attractive or will be composed of modes that are not sustainable at all. Also, very important, good alternatives to reach the public transport, to reach the mass transit systems. Also, of course, the good connectivity and good quality data standards. I mean, it's not have data; we have to have data with good quality, and also a clear vision of the framework about the responsibilities and duties of each player, like Vasilis presented. There is no magical good solution, but what you need is to have the clear vision and the concept that you want to have to the orchestration of different players in the region.
Okay, thank you. Vasilis?
Just one moment to unmute. Yes. In fact, I will also pass to everybody in the chat. I was participating in one practitioner briefing, which was about mobility as a service and sustainable urban mobility planning. And there was an indication of what is the relevant MaaS maturity parameters, let's say, for a city. And I will just, I think it's better if I follow this paradigm from this practitioner briefing. The parameters that are indicating maturity regarding mobility as a service are transport operators' openness and data sharing. So this is very essential. Policy regulation and legislation. So it means that already there is some kind of policy objective there, regulated within a framework and the relevant legislation. Citizen familiarity and willingness, ICT infrastructure, available transport services, and physical infrastructure. I would agree, however, also with Jorge, that the most important aspect is the vision. So, in fact, we need all this as prerequisites, but what is more important is to have the vision to deploy this kind of service within a specific framework. As I said before, there is no correct way to deploy it, but there are several, and there should be a preferred one.
Now, that was very smart of you to use the practitioner briefing. And with that, you have already made an exhaustive checklist of preconditions, making it difficult for our two other speakers to add anything to that. But maybe Mattias and Jordi, you're coming from two big cities. Do you have an opinion about the size of cities or a minimum size that would be from which it would make sense to look into MaaS? Is it also something for smaller areas? What is your view on that? Mattias first.
I would say that perhaps it can be a little easier for smaller and mid-sized cities. And the integrated ticketing zone that we have here has only come about because of the rather special political constitutional circumstances, meaning that it could be rammed through against the interest of those who didn't want it. So, and given the amount of political and ideological differences between central city and hinterland over here in Stockholm, I can say that without those specific set of circumstances, it would never have happened. So if coordination of political aims and goals can't be done over a larger, well, perhaps it's easier to do coordination of political aims and goals over a region that's not so big and diverse. Perhaps it's easier if it's a little more modestly shaped.
Mm-hmm. Jordi, your opinion on size?
Yeah, I think, Katharina, it's not only about the city or population size, because for me, mobility is something that goes more further the municipality limits, because people comes from and goes to beyond your city. Of course, medium-sized and small cities can arrange in an easy way a mobility as a service platform. But I think the the focus should be to have the mobility as a service platform coordinated, integrated with your neighbors, because that's the way citizens can find it useful. Because if you want to go from A to B, but you don't only have the platform of A, this platform is not useful for this citizen. No? So you need to integrate. That's and you can do it. It's not easy to coordinate different municipalities. Municipal administration or supra-municipal administrations can help on it. It's not always easy. And I think that the collaboration between administration, and stakeholders and operators is the main key points to have success building up these kind of platforms.
Thank you very much. And I see some questions from the audience. Simon?
Yes, so we have a question here from Nadia. She's asking, does how to get stakeholders to work together? In our experience, each mobility provider is often very focused on its own business area and does not want to be dependent on cooperation. So yes, so experience of how to get stakeholders to work together.
Okay, I can start. I can say that although I'm at academic level in research, I also face the same problems, and I see that here, for instance, in Portugal, there is the same problems, and each player is too much focused on its duties. So I think in that case, it should be the public sector and the public authorities to take the lead and establish the regional vision, and then make some kind of even public procurement or some direct involvement of the local stakeholders. If there isn't that in civil society, this is not happens naturally, should be the public authorities to take the lead.
Jordi?
Thank you. I have no, maybe it's not a direct experience about the question, but I think that our experience about setting out this working table with the different operators, looking with them together, the way we are going to regulate the services, help to have a more predisposed and more friendly way of these private stakeholders. Also, the regulation and the basis we wrote and we are going to establish, give up part of the power to ask them for this collaboration and implication when sharing and being integrated on the platforms.
Thank you. Another take on how to get the stakeholders on board?
I have some experience on this, and I think it's really difficult. I agree with the comment. I have seen that happening not only in MaaS, but also in other mobility aspects, like, for example, traffic management, etc. This is why we have also suggested the use of a neutral entity. It means that there is an entity that can guarantee that not one party or the other will take, let's say, the lead, or will take advantage of their power. I think this is important, but otherwise, if there is no regulation on top-down, or in fact there is a lot of companies and initiatives bottom-up, then probably they will never all the stakeholders come the same around the same table. Very hard.
Mm. Maybe we can talk a little bit about data in this context, because the collaboration also involves the sharing of data, and this is a little touchy. But the shared data are very important. So I think the data platforms that are to be used should be open data sharing platforms, so that ultimately the integration also with everybody else that is interested maybe in the first time you integrate, let's say, a bigger functional area around one city, but maybe tomorrow with a neighboring region. And if the neighboring region has a different data standard, then this will not be possible. Can you share a little bit the experience on your data backbones with us? And we don't need to go in order of appearance. You can go as you would like to contribute.
If you like, I can continue with my previous one. We have also a very bad experience about the data. And I agree that there are two types of problem. One is really the willingness to share. And this is very strange. There are some countries, of course, in the north, but they have put a legal framework in sharing the data. So this is almost mandatory. And although this is the case also for Greece, it's not so common. I mean, even for example, some data we have seen to be easily shared with Google, but not easily shared with other organizations, which is very strange. I have seen that in some cases. So there is one thing which is about the willingness. And there is one very important thing you mentioned, which is about the technical standards. So if we don't have really a good technical standard to share the data, we have a problem. I think these two problems can be solved also with the national access point, because the national access point in the future will also require multimodal data. So it will require also public transport and other data to be there. And this may solve the problem, because this would be then a national problem and a local problem.
I think why Helsinki is so far with its MaaS is also that Finland, and particularly the Helsinki region, has a very advanced policy already for many years on open data. They have opened all the data available to the in the city to the public. And everybody can access these data and propose them for new business ideas and use them for developing services. So this has not been shared specifically for the area of mobility, but rather to foster innovation.
And you have also this National Transport Act in Finland, which provide a national law and a clear regulation framework. What I also think it's this fear of not be compatible with the neighboring regions should not be used also as an excuse to not go forward, move forward, since the big majority of trips are happen in the urban functional areas. So at least if you start and start accomplishing the rules of the national access points, this can be a good start. And at the end, I think it will be easier, the integration with also the other regions, even other countries, which is the last goal of mobility service.
Okay. Good. We are slowly reaching the end of our webinar. Last chance to submit any questions to our speakers. I would like to give each of you the floor for 1 minute for your takeaway and your key lessons from today's webinar for our audience. Let's start from in order of appearance. It will be easier.
So it's me? No, I think I think everyone is talking about what is the ingredients to have a MaaS. I think this is clear. I think regions, we also have to think about the use of car, and to put the car into the equation of mobility as a service. Because if you don't address the issue of cars and have smarter ways to charge the use of cars in cities, either by GPS tools or congestion tools or smart policing policies, you are just addressing a small part of the mobility ecosystem. So I think you have to start thinking right now also in a smarter use of charging the cars.
You mean like the integration also of the e-car charging infrastructure into MaaS?
E-cars and fuel and even our cars. If you, I can, for instance, have a discount on my taxis, on the fuel that I pay. But if I cross a urban center where there is public alternatives in public transport, I could pay more for a congestion tool. Or you have to be smarter in the way that you can charge our mobility.
I see. Interesting point. Thank you very much, George. Vasilis, your key takeaways and reflections.
I fully agree with this approach. I think that what we have seen in the past, what was considered in the past to be, another application for the travelers, it's not just that, because MaaS has two potentials, great potentials. One is the fact that we can influence the user behavior. And we can include, and it's not only the road charging, it's also zone access control, low emission zones, and so on. All these tools, traffic management tools that can be integrated into MaaS, influence the use of the actual car towards the use of other means. This is very important, so it's a tool. The second thing is the data that they are integrated and they are aggregated together. And we can use this data, a lot of this data, both for planning, for better planning, but also for better service to the end user, to the traveler. That's from my side.
Thank you, Vasilis. Mattias, your takeaways.
Well, representing a rather heavy-handed top-down centralized system that could make something interesting work, I can say that that is perhaps not the only way of doing it. It's rather specific circumstances that made it a success. And perhaps also, as some already have mentioned, include the issue of congestion charges. I didn't mention that, but the congestion charges and the ticket fee are equal. So when you need to pass through the city, the cost for the going with a car or going with the public transport system is more or less the same. So congestion charges is also could be designed into a larger MaaS system for both the whip and the carrot.
Yeah, if the car is factored into the equation in a more systematic way, perhaps the sustainability indicators in Jorge's table will become green instead of red and orange. Okay, thank you very much, Mattias. Jordi, your key learnings.
Thank you, Katharina. If you don't mind, I will focus my key learnings on the strongly recommendation on for the regulation of these new mobility services that are flowing on our cities, because it helps us to have more power from the administration side on this use of the city and the urban space. And also you have to include all the stakeholders on this regulation. So the way we did with this working table was quite successful, and we expect to have the return the following months or years with the implementation.
That's a very good point. The regulation gives the power to the cities, yes, and maybe also then the power to force to share the data. And
exactly.
The power to do other things. Yes, thank you very much. A very good takeaways from all of you. I would like to thank you all for your contributions and for the and the topic is how can mobility policy help us save oil, Essentially, we want to look at mobility policy and practices from the perspective of saving fuel. So it's a crisis-induced topic. And can we see the slide on the event on 24th of January? Anyway, it's on 24th of January, and you can see already in the chat the link registration is open. We have just started inviting our projects and our community, and we have a keynote from the International Energy, a 10-point plan on how to cut oil use in the mobility area, and we hope that this is going to be valid for you and inspiring and putting mobility policy in the focus of contributing to solve our current energy crisis. Voila, that's it from our side. Thank you very much for being with us today again, for having been with us many times throughout the year. That goes to our returning participants, from whom we have some in today's webinar. Enough, I will stop talking. It is time to conclude. I wish you all a Merry Christmas from the entire Interreg Europe and Policy Learning Platform team. Thank you very much, and see you again healthy and relaxed next year.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.